So let's get right into it. Quick recap here. Art as an idea tells us, at least on the craft level, that we have a world that can be broken into two ideas, structure and gesture. And the gesture is what makes the living world feel like it's alive. The gesture is how things relate together, how they fit together. So how we get from here to here. And in any art form, they work on the same binary system of a part and the relationship between the parts. The most difficult and the most important element of this is the relationship, how things come together. That's where the real craft skills happen, is where we get this in just the right relationship to that. Choosing a simple shape for one body part or another doesn't take tons of practice. You can spend a career refining your choices, but you can do pretty well, pretty quick in any art form. Getting your body into a certain dance step, your fingers into a certain position for the note on a piano, and so on. But getting them to relate together, that's the trick. So what we're going to do now is, as we go through all the pieces of the body, we're going to see how the structure and the gesture track through that. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to try and get a structure that has great solidity, rings true, and then has an out, how it flows into the next. And the muscles and the bone are going to create this marvelous complex structure that has all these engineering, mechanical, leverage type machine workings. And yet they're going to have this fluid life energy, this lifeline underneath that's going to show us that it's a living structure and how that living structure relates to the whole ecosystem of the body. So we want to think of the gesture as the fundamental design line. It's more important than the structure. You can pick up any basic shape and it will work well for a particular body part as long as it's simple, easy to get down, easy to redesign, and easily and quick for deadlines, all those kind of criteria. But it has to be simple and characteristic. So our real skill set develops in terms of getting structure successfully down on the page of the canvas when we make it simple yet characteristic. So we look at something and with an ever more refined eye, we decide that, well, it's kind of round, so maybe I'll do an egg, but more characteristic would be a tube. And maybe it would be a tube that tapers and a tube that curves with a fluid idea, and a tube that gets a little squarer here and a little rounder here. Maybe you'll end up with a tube that has an egg to begin and it morphs into a 2x4 at the end. You've kept it relatively simple, but you've made it ever more characteristic, ever more refined. And the criteria when we say characteristic is as close as possible to the finish without having to finish it. That's what we're trying to do, is pick something that's simple enough that we can get it down in a reasonable manner, in a quick time frame. We can judge that it's working on some level, and then it's characteristic, so it's as close as possible to the finish idea without having to be finished. The reason we want that is the obvious thing. First, if we had to stop, it still rings true. We still get the idea down very clearly that this is a round shape, or maybe it's an egg, maybe it's a capsule shape, it's a little flatter on the side. That's simple yet characteristic of the head. And if I had to stop there, they get the idea of the head pretty well. But actually, more importantly than that, when I can get something that's simple and characteristic, it's going to fit much better to the next thing. That's going to make our connections better. That's going to make our gesture better. And so when we make it characteristic, what we're really doing is making sure both ideas work well enough that what we've put down, the marks we've have made, ring true. That's going to be our criteria. And of course, your simple yet characteristic structure and your sense of it ringing true will be a little bit different than mine, as it should be, and that's going to be the gateway to our style. Fundamental design line. and the connecting line. We want to really create a gesture, not that some mysterious line of life energy inside the form, but something that sits right on the simplified surface that we can connect a structure to, two-dimensionally and three-dimensionally. And then if that's characteristic enough, it's going to make a nice connection. We'll get enough structure to begin gesture number 2, well connected, and we'll build another simply a characteristic form and move on and on and on. So that's going to be our process here. And then we'll work very hard today, especially on the joints, to see how those structures and gestures come together and become quite sophisticated.